It is Friday, May 23rd. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Onimusha episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The May games are still live on PSN. Make sure you claim those before they go away. Also, PS Plus Extra and Premium. The May lineup is now live on PSN as well, and that also means we now have some games that will exit the game catalog in about a month's time, around June 17th. Now this time, not a mass exodus. Only 6 games are leaving. But we do have some fairly high-profile exits, that being Monster Hunter Rise, After Us, Rogue Legacy 2. Inscription is really good. Now, it is a card game, so if you're not into those, then you can probably skip it, but I would still encourage you to give that game a shot. It goes places that you will not expect. You've also got Avicii and Vector, and then for Premium, 1 game leaving, Kayak VR Mirage. So that PSVR 2 benefit is getting smaller and smaller. There's not many PSVR 2 games on Premium anymore, but yeah, definitely Inscription and Monster Hunter would be the recommendation here. Certainly Monster Hunter, because that game is, over 100, 200 hours easy. You could spend a lot of time on that game, so you might want to start playing that now before it leaves the catalog. All right, moving on to our first news story. PlayStation Stars is dead after 2.5 years, basically. So they did not even make it 3 years for what is a fairly new rewards program for PlayStation owners. So confirmed on the PS blog, Sony says right now they're not accepting any new memberships, but a full closure is going to take place on November 2nd, 2026. And current members right now can still earn digital collectibles, points, and level up until July 23rd, 2025. After that, there's not going to be any new campaigns, additional rewards, or status upgrades. Now, as a reminder, PS Stars launched in September of 2022, and since then has been down for 2-3 times, sometimes up to a month for maintenance. They also, halfway through the program, removed the option to, or rather the ability to earn points through PS Plus memberships. They also temporarily removed the option to redeem PSN wallet funds, or they also, in some cases, got rid of the lowest $5 option, so you had to spend more to cash out sooner, or later, rather. So the whole thing has been very clearly Sony monitoring the program, and it seems like it's just not working out for them, because that is the point of the program, right? Is that, for you, it's about 4% back based on the point accumulation for cashing out and getting wallet funds. So having something is always better than nothing. But Sony wants to monitor the behavior of the customer and try to encourage more spending on PSN, playing more on PlayStation Network too, with those campaigns that have you launch all these games and play this game and buy this game day one for an extra 50 bonus points. That's what they're trying to do with all those campaigns. And so we saw, with them making it worse and worse over this very short 2.5 year period, they must be spending more than it's really worth, and so yeah, they're shutting it down. They do say they're evaluating other ways to do this in the future. If it ever comes back, it probably is going to look way worse based on the percentage, or maybe not doing the campaigns or doing the whole digital collectible thing. That's the other weird part of this too. It was so fleshed out actually when they launched it with the digital collectibles, because it was kind of cool. Now, I would never spend the points on a collectible, but it was really neat that they came up with all these really goofy collectibles that were in some cases tied to your ID historically, as in if you bought a PS3 or PSVR 2 or PSVR 1, PS4 Slim consoles, you would get those campaigns and they just auto give you the collectible. And so those were super cool to set up your cabinet on your profile, and we thought that would maybe show up on PS5 consoles. And so it's a really neat way to personalize the experience. This whole thing is just a massive L. It sucks for customers not being able to start having this program that rewards you for spending on PSN. There's no more of the digital collectible stuff. That's all going to get shut down. It's just, I saw this and I'm like, really, guys? You can't, this is the bare minimum. This was actually a really cool little initiative, finally having some kind of rewards program for your customers, and it's killed. So, this is just totally bogus. And it's just this is one of those things where it's this is a very modern Sony move, not being able to maintain a very basic reward system for your customers. Next up, we finally have some kind of rumor about a possible PlayStation event happening fairly soon, which that was kind of concerning recently, as that we're near the end of May, or getting close to it, And we've not heard anything at all that is remotely credible, no rumors about the typical PlayStation event in the end of May, which Sony has really liked that time period, right? They do like to hold state of plays or showcases around this time frame. And so recently we did hear some not so good news from Nate the Hate, Nate Drake over on the Reset Era PS Studios OT, where they said they still have not heard anything about a May event from Sony this year. And Nate's been very reliable. Certainly he has been recently. But just a few days later, actually yesterday, we had Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb share what he's heard. And he did mention that he's heard of one in June this time around. And he's not sure if it's a showcase or a state of play, but he is leaning towards it being a state of play personally. And he also said it was abnormally difficult to even hear about this news. So I guess him poking around for this info, certain people just weren't in the know compared to maybe prior events. And Jeff has been, the one thing Jeff's been very reliable for is PlayStation events or just any sort of gaming events, period. So that's the one thing that almost always he's right on the money for. So in this case, it does sound like maybe Sony's really trying to keep this information closer to their chest as far as what they're planning on doing for their own events or live streams. And they do have this like obligation to eventually hold these announcements and these live streams because they have publishing partners. So if they promise time slots and all that jazz, I mean, typically they are going to say something eventually. It's just the expectation of, oh, they've done May a lot recently, so why have we not heard anything just yet? But maybe we could just always chalk that up to how unusual PlayStation has been this cycle. It's the points we always mention of, sure, there are certain patterns like May or September, but then they also love doing state of plays in January and February, or sometimes dedicated game state of plays, or sometimes events on Random Tuesday, or sometimes events at Jeff Keighley events. Like, there are patterns, but also not patterns. There's still a lot of wild cards that Sony throws at us, so maybe waiting until right in the middle of June, maybe being closer to the whole not E3 in the midst of the SGF season. That might be what they're looking to do this time around. And as far as like announcements go, obviously it's a little bit of a catch-22 in that we've had a lot of not so good news lately with a lot of their studios basically being reset. We're talking your Blue Point or your Bend. Media Molecule still, I imagine, maybe kind of far away from saying something. Haven Studios is not looking too good right now, although I'm not sure people are really psyched to hear news about their games anyway. But there is still this other half of, we are expecting Saros gameplay this year. We're eventually expecting more of a formal reveal of Marvel's Wolverine, or Cory Barlog's new IP from Santa Monica, which has been in the oven for a very long time. Guerrilla Games' Horizon multiplayer IP that they've been developing since 2018. And this God of War, like smaller Greek spin-off game or a semi-sequel, whatever that ends up being, there are things that we are still expecting. It just is highly dependent on when Sony chooses to talk about these things. And we've seen they just don't really consolidate announcements like they used to in the prior cycle, right? It's been very different. They do spread themselves much more thin, which they kind of have to, given that games take so long to make nowadays, which I can totally understand. But there's that, and also the logistical nightmare of these studios having to prepare assets and get them ready on time for what are, in some cases, very much arbitrary dates when they just want to keep working on these games and get them out the door. So for now, at least, we're finally hearing something. That's the news. June, not too far away. It's still right around the corner. And now we'll keep watching this and see what Sony is going to eventually say. Moving on to some PlayStation Studio news and talking about Naughty Dog, we do have a lot of things going on with Neil Druckmann. He's been showing up at a lot of different places, doing a lot of talking. One thing that stuck out was his recent conversation on the Press X to Continue podcast, where Neil briefly mentioned that Naughty Dog's other project that's in the works, he confirms that he's not directing it. He said, and I quote here, "Then there's another game that's being worked on at Naughty Dog where I'm in more of a producer role and I get to mentor, watch this other team, and give feedback and be the executive in the room. I enjoy all those roles, and the fact that I jump from one to the next makes my job very exciting and always feeling fresh. I'm never bored." Now, it's also worth pointing out over on Reset Era for the thread about this story, Shinobi602, who's been very privy to what's going on at these studios and oftentimes will reliably point us in the right direction for these studios, they felt inclined to clarify that this project in particular is not a smaller one. basically letting people know this is not going to be an Uncharted Lost Legacy type of situation. And so that's going to clarify. I mean, so we now know that this game is another very big single-player game that's likely trailing behind Intergalactic, which that on its own is not the most alarming news. Naughty Dog is a very big studio. They have a lot of directors, 3 of them being on Intergalactic, so that being Kurt, Neil, and Matthew, but there's still others that are unaccounted for, like Sean Escagee, Anthony Newman, and so there's just a lot going on at the studio. Like, for example, that one game, while it was canceled, it was never confirmed or talked about or anything like that, but you can just usually verify this stuff very easily on LinkedIn. But when Vineet Agarwal had The Last of Us Online canceled, they were leading that for a bit, or for years, I should say, rather. That was canceled in December of 2023. Then I guess they were doing another single-player game for most of 2024, and that was canceled in January of this year. Then they left the studio, and so that's already some freed up time. That game must not have gotten very far along, and sometimes that's what happens. Obviously, just kill the game if you can't figure out where to, how to proceed. But this might be a byproduct of that, or maybe it's already been going on for a little bit now. Either way, though, like, the news to me, honestly, is Neil admitting that he's a producer on this game and he's not directing it. That, like, the read for me is, oh, that's not The Last of Us Part 3. Because The Last of Us is his baby. He loves the world, the universe, the characters. They mean so much to him. So for him to openly admit that I'm not directing that game, I'm not completely hands-on in the way that I am with Intergalactic, that sounds like, okay, this other game is probably a new IP. I mean, of course, it could be existing, but I'm certainly not holding out hope that it's going to be like Jack and Daxter, for example. So I would think it's probably a new IP. But I thought that was definitely worth mentioning, is that he's basically admitting right then and there that this other game is not The Last of Us 3. He's had some very, back and forth comments on the property of, oh, maybe it'll never happen. Oh, wait, I have a concept, this through line that works for 1, 2, all the way to 3. But there's still been like no concrete evidence of Part 3 being a thing or it being far along. It very well could be. It could be a super small incubation project that is very far away. Having said that, this game likely is not The Last of Us Part 3. That's at least my read on the situation as it stands right now. Moving on to developer Housemarque, where we have some really nice comments coming from the studio head and also the creative director. So recently, last week, during their 30th anniversary event in Finland, they were speaking with Eurogamer, and so we have the studio head Ilari Kuitunen and creative director Gregory Loudon. They said as long as people are buying premium games, that's what they're sticking to, saying, and I quote here, "Our philosophy is that our games are an experience for a certain time of your life, and you experience that within a few days or weeks or whatever. It's a unique experience, you have it, you get something out of it, maybe you come back to it, but you don't need to play it for the rest of your life." They are saying all the right things, or at least they're saying them in the here and now. It's always a good time to remind people that before the acquisition from Sony, they were in a very tough spot with the Arcade is Dead blog post, them having to move away from their arcade bullet hell style action gameplay, and they very much were working on a PvP, I think PvPvE experience. They had some alpha gameplay out there. They were very much trying to do some kind of battle royale style game, which would have been such an ugly pivot for that studio, because there was that mounting pressure for every game studio around to sort of come up with something like that has recurring revenue, good cash flow, and I mean, I get it, right? But they were also independent, and they had to figure out, what was the next path for them. But getting acquired by SIE and them having the full financial backing to go and do a game like Returnal and now Saros, it is a lovely byproduct of that kind of consolidation. That is one of the good things about that sort of deal. And it does also prove another point too, which some people still hate hearing this, but it still tracks with what we've always seen from SIE, in that they're not assigning studios certain things. They're not putting developers on things and telling them they have to do this. There's certain initiatives that they obviously are, very heavy on and they like to see, and sometimes a studio may feel the pressure to pitch that to Sony, but oftentimes they still have that autonomy to do what they want to do as creatives. They just have to get that financial backing from Sony, and they do have to make that pitch. In the case of Housemarque, they are in this position of, these are the games we make, these are the games we pitch to Sony, and in the here and now, that's what we're sticking to, that's what we're good at, and I love it. And I'm so happy to have them put out comments like that to where they're so committed to the experiences that they are extremely talented at. Moving on to Bungie, where there has been nothing good going on for the studio as of late. We have the Marathon Alpha, where it's not bad, but people just don't seem to be in love with it. There's also more accusations of the studio leadership being poor and the plagiarism scandal. We didn't cover that last week, but that very much was a thing where another plagiarism scandal popped up, where there were some art assets that very clearly looked like they were pulled from the independent artist Anti-Real. So they had to, drum up interest on Twitter because they're independent, they're small, they don't have legal recourse. And so the studio did come out and acknowledge it and say that that was from a former artist that was using them in a texture sheet, and that went unnoticed from 2020 all the way to the closed alpha, which is really tough as far as accountability goes. But there was that. Then we had a separate report come out from Paul Tassi over at Forbes about Bungie's morale being in a free fall, where Paul spoke with current and former staff. And right now, the studio leadership and Sony are considering their options for adjusting the marketing plan and the new trailer for June with Marathon. And they're also considering maybe changing the public beta in August into a roadmap of public play tests. And then in a separate video from Paul discussing the current Bungie situation, he also alleges that internally, the studio needs this game to be in the top 5 of Circana sales for the year to be considered a success. And then after that, we also had another video come out, this time from Destin Legary, where he too is speaking with former staff, and he shares a lot of grim words where, yet again, a lot of blame is being placed at Bungie, the Bungie leadership rather. And so some are even going out of their way to say, like, maybe the best path here is folding completely into Sony. And that's a lot of what has happened so far, I guess. I mean, not completely. Bungie is still, for the most part, independent to a degree. We did hear about back-end office operations being integrated into SIE. There were a lot of layoffs, like 300-something staff, and that was also the number not a part of the staff moving from Bungie to SIE corporate, also not including the 40 or so staff that were spun off into their own studio, Team LFG, under PlayStation Studios. We know that Sony personnel from the very beginning were put on the Bungie board, but it's still this recurring comment of it is the studio leadership. I also think about that rumor we talked about on LTPS a few months ago, if you remember, where I guess a lot of on-the-ground staff allegedly wanted to try and pitch a single-player game or maybe go back to single-player, and the leadership was just not having it. And that's one of many instances where, the leadership is just very greedy, and they're really concerned about the cash flow and wanting to stick with these live service elements, or doing a subscription for Destiny and just trying to monetize the customer even more and more and more. I guess another really weird decision too was shooting down the possibility of PvE content in Marathon, which maybe would have helped the game a lot more given the current spot it's in right now, where there's just very low player interest. And so if there really is this like pie in the sky idea that this game needs to sell in the top 5 for the year in the US, which is like the 8 million or 8-figure unit sales ballpark, like, gosh, I don't see how that's going to happen given like the alpha right now. The alpha, it very much is probably enough to see where this game is going to land, which is not going to be like I wouldn't say a Concord, but gosh, I don't know where they go from here. There is a lot of friction, obviously, with the whole relationship of Bungie and Sony. It's interesting that you're seeing so many staff and even like hardcore Bungie fans say like maybe that does need to happen, which ironically that kind of circles back to what we always say about Sony with their studios, and that they give them creative autonomy. These studios have a culture and a sort of creative freedom that they always have as far as being able to come up with concepts, ideas, pitch that to Sony. They get a green light, they get that financial backing, and they can go off and do things like a Returnal or a Dreams for how long. And sometimes you could argue they need to step in a little bit sooner and maybe get Media Molecule moving on to something else. That's why we always have to say, like, they don't necessarily assign studios projects or force them or put them on live service. Not necessarily the way people expect. But in this case with Bungie, where it was against the grain of how they always acquire studios, and that it's a long-standing partnership, and you know that team very well, there's a very intimate relationship of you know what you're walking into, and they clearly did not get that from Bungie, where they were lying about financials, and just there's been so many complaints as far as how the studio has been made up and the toxic culture surrounding it. So, it's like maybe this is the one circumstance where Sony does have to come in and really clean up house. But again, like there's already a lot of integration happening to begin with, and so how much more needs to happen for Sony to eventually say, you're done, and this is what we're going to do from here on out. We're going to bring in our own people, our own leadership, and we're going to, start talking to all these on-the-ground employees and figure out what's really going on, where do they want to go, where do they want to take the company, and really sort of realign what the studio maybe should be, because at the end of the day, it is that on-the-ground staff that are making these games and putting out the gameplay experiences that people love or used to love from this team. That's at least the most viable path, I think. I don't know if you shut down all of Bungie, because they do still have ongoing projects. They have Destiny to maintain. It's not like Destiny is a complete wash here, so I don't think this is the sort of like studio closure expectation we could see, right? So I don't think that's on the cards here. But what would be ideal is maybe seeing a very massive course correct if it's always the leadership which is continuously to blame here. If enough people are saying it, you got to figure that's maybe what is the issue. So we'll keep watching Bungie, but man, this acquisition has just been terrible for Sony. Even if the initial decision I still find made sense, but you just never know until you're on the other side of it. And now we're here, and wow, that was bad. Next up, Hideo Kojima has given us a timeline for when we can expect his next big PlayStation partnership, which is Physint. We know that game is a new tactical espionage IP, and it is indeed, very, very far away. So he was speaking with the French magazine Le Film Français, and Kojima was asked about if he wanted to work on more films, to which he said yes, absolutely, but he did further explain that he still has a lot of game projects going on right now, with that being Death Stranding 2, OD, and Physint. And so for Physint, he did say that game is going to take him another 5 or 6 years, so maybe after that, where he'll be 66, 67, he will then tackle a film. The man is old. He's getting up there. I'm not trying to be rude to him, but he's getting up there in age, right? And that was also a story that we didn't cover. But he's one of those crazy folks where he puts ideas on a USB stick and he leaves that for his staff, and he wants them to explore those ideas after he's gone, right? But he's probably very much thinking that was the story, is that he was ill for a little bit, couldn't work on games, and he started to have that sort of realization of, I only have so much time left to work on certain things, and what are those things going to be? But he probably did have that moment of what else am I going to really be able to do before I leave this planet? Physint sounds like it will be one of the last games that he does end up doing. But yeah, 5-6 years, I would think that's also... Well, actually, I don't want to say optimistic. He gave timelines for Death Stranding 1, if I remember correctly, and those were pretty much right on the money. It was actually pretty impressive how quickly he was able to turn that game around from the initial handshake with Andrew House to eventually having that game be playable. So he might actually be dead on as far as 5-6 years, but that would indeed mean from where we are right now, 2030, 2031, PlayStation 6. Yep, that's when you can expect Kojima's next big IP, the next big PlayStation partnership, which that also illustrates, mind you, deals that are inked right now are inked with that understanding of, oh yes, this will be a great lineup game for PlayStation 6 in 2030 or something. These things take a very long time to put together. And that's kind of where we are with PlayStation 5, and often in some cases, as far as, hey, where are these games? Well, it depends on what was inked years ago now at this point. Moving on to Stellar Blade, where this game has done very well for a developer shift-up, and they've also recently confirmed a PS5 and PC version, a complete edition rather, shipping on June 11th, and that's going to include all the expansions and the skins, so a great way to dive in if you haven't bought the game just yet. But more importantly, we did see from a recent investor presentation that shift-up did confirm that they are working on a sequel to Stellar Blade, which they actually placed this next to Project Witches in this this chart breakdown, and you can see that both these projects are before 2027. So I guess they're planning on releasing this game by 2026, which would be kind of insane. Not sure how they're going to pull that off unless the game is short, unless they're working a lot, reusing a lot of assets, and they've just been really hard at work ever since shipping the base game in 2024. No clue what's going on there. That seems very ambitious, but we did catch wind of that, which is another example of Sony funding a game, getting a whole publishing agreement going on, and then they went public, and so now they're beholden to shareholders, so there is that pressure to deliver those projects on time, but not sure if that also means they would be willing to do another multi-plat agreement, or rather exclusivity agreement, because they would now be more inclined to do multi-plat now that they're also established and have capital, so they might not want to partner up with Sony again, or at least not for exclusivity, but that remains to be seen. The other thing we can mention, though, is that with the game shipping on PC, Sony is also publishing on PC as well, and that means they're carrying over the issue of the game not being able to be bought in over 100 countries. And what's interesting is that the Stellar Blade Twitter account responded to a fan with this concern, where they acknowledged it, saying that they have good news to share soon, so stay tuned. Now, I don't know what that means either, unless there's like some kind of path where they can get that restriction removed. We know PSN is no longer required for their games that they publish, so, or at least most of them, because I believe it is still required for like Midnight Murder Club. But otherwise, we know PSN's not required, but it is still something where if they're publishing, they just don't have that sort of logistical way to collect all that local currency. So that's partly, or at least we assume that is the primary issue, and these are countries where it's a very small bulk of the sales, right? So that's sort of SI's attitude, but hopefully there is a path here that makes sense where they can eventually start having the footprint to sell everywhere, especially in this context of they are a publishing partner with a third-party studio, and this is a team that they're speaking to a lot of customers on a global scale, and people want to play that game. So you don't ever want Sony to be publishing a PC game, and they're the reason why, a game can't be bought in a particular location. Maybe there is a fix coming up soon. Moving on to the India Hero Project, where one of the games accepted into the program, Mukti, just got a brand new gameplay trailer, and it looks very good. It's shaping up quite nicely. As a reminder, Mukti is the game where it's about exploring an Indian museum, and the player is uncovering truths and these hidden narratives around human trafficking. So right now they're showing off pre-alpha gameplay captured on PlayStation 5, but it does look quite good. And I'll tell you, this is what I love about the Hero Project initiatives, which is a game like this. You would have never seen it published on console and see financial backing from a company like Sony. It's so cool. I love the Hero Projects, and in a way, I don't know, I don't want to go off on this tangent of like being contrarian or trying to defend PlayStation. I think there's so many like completely valid complaints about the company right now, where they're at, all the missteps they've taken with PlayStation 5, and certainly their own studios and the live service initiative and the closing of some studios. I totally get all of that stuff. But I think it's so easy to complain about that and then completely overlook the Hero Projects, which is scouting out this talent in these places that, typically were not being covered and not seeing financial backing from an established player like Sony. And I don't know, it's like, you look at this game, we would have never gotten something like this, or at the very least, this is the kind of game that sort of harkens back to like a Japan studio game, where it's different, it's maybe not quirky, but it's sort of, in my head, it's a very similar type of experience and that kind of game, And oftentimes, I think we get really hung up on this idea of Sony has to own the IP and they have to own the studio, or it has to be this second-party experience and it has to be locked down in perpetuity. And I don't know, like, I always look at the initial PS5 experiences where they partnered up close with like Bugsnax, Kana, and Stray, Chia, and then the Hero programs where they're really fostering this talent in these underrepresented countries or developing countries and, giving them financial backing. And like, I really appreciate that. In a way, it's like, I don't know, it's so easy to like be upset about like the sort of dearth of Japan studio, not having those type of experiences. But I keep circling back around to the idea of like, we still have them. It's just not truly exclusive. It's not locked down. And I don't know, I think if you're actually for games and the benefit of like the hardworking people at the studios, like, works out great for them. It's a grant or it's some kind of like short-term agreement where eventually they can ship on other platforms, and Sony doesn't lock down an IP where they do 1 or 2 games and then never touch it ever again. I don't know. That's where my mind keeps coming back to that. I think it's great what they're doing with the Hero program, and I really don't want that to be lost on people, because I look at something like Mukti and it's like, that's cool, and you bet I'm going to be there day one and trying out that experience. Moving on to another update for the ongoing transition of Xbox shipping their games over on PlayStation. The new one here is Hellblade 2, or Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, now confirmed for PlayStation 5. The Enhanced Edition is coming this summer, and it will support PS5 Pro and the DualSense haptics and triggers, and you can wishlist it right now on PSN. And also, for those curious, we do have a small update for Starfield as well. So Nate the Hate, who again has been very accurate as of late, even though they did mention they didn't hear anything about a May event, but that's neither here nor there. They did provide a very small update on Starfield, where the intent is that it should be announced this year, and the gap between announcement and release should be minimal, as in when they talk about it, shouldn't be too long until it comes out on PlayStation 5. So there's your 2 big updates there, and a small little side news story. The FTC did drop their case against the ABK deal, so obviously that wasn't going to go anywhere, so they did end up dropping that as well. Next up, Rockstar Games, or rather Take-Two, gave us maybe a very small hint as to what might be going on with their pricing, or what we can expect, because we did see out of nowhere the UK price, and I believe some places in South America as well, saw a stealth price increase for both Red Dead Redemption games. So Red Dead 1 went from, in the UK, £40 to $50, and then Red Dead 2 went from $55 to $60, and then the dual pack bundle went up to $15 as well to align with the new price increase. So we did see that out of nowhere. It was the same price for a while. It's a digital game. Why else would the price have to go up? So that's one indicator. And then we also had another adjacent news story, which is Randy Pitchford doing what he does best, which is not being quiet. It is completely free nowadays to not say a thing, but this is what Randy does tend to do, and sure enough, he had to say something before Borderlands 4 was able to come out. So what happened here is that over on Twitter, there was a fan, pleading with Randy that the game not be $80, and so Randy responded with, and I quote here, A, not my call. B, if you're a real fan, you'll find a way to make it happen. My local game store had Starflight for Sega Genesis for $80 in 1991 when I was just out of high school working minimum wage at an ice cream parlor in Pismo Beach, and I found a way to make it happen. Now, you don't need me to tell you that that is such a misaligned, very disconnected from society comment. It's a not being able to read the room comment. It's a Randy Pitchford comment. It's awful. It's I don't know why he keeps saying things like this. He was quiet for quite a while, but that is partly why we have PR and people just generally, for studio leadership, if anything's going to be said about a game or the studio, it goes through PR first. It's carefully vetted so you don't have off-the-cuff comments like this. It just looks bad. Really bad. You don't need me to tell you how bad that looks. Even if there's going to be somebody out there that loves to play the advocate of, well, hey, it's true because of inflation, but wages not going up and this, that, and the fourth. We all know about all that stuff, right? Just not a good comment, not a good look. I too could share a comment, or a story rather, like that, which is a young Ryan saving a lot to buy a PlayStation 3 in 2006. And I'll tell you, I didn't have much money back then. I don't think that's a great excuse for why PS5 Pro should be $700 today. You know what I mean? It's not exactly a valid excuse. When you're young, yeah, sure, you're hungry and you want to save up and buy the cool thing that you want because you're a kid and you're on copium. But that's not really that doesn't really stand up when you're an adult, and you should be careful about the things you say and being more mindful about other people's financial situations. So yeah, that was Randy. Randy gonna Randy. Next up, we just had to mention this, which is a new contender stepping into the ring of printing physical video games, but with a very clear mission statement of everything is installable offline, the game is on the disc, or Switch 2, no game key cards. They will do full 64 gig cards, all DLC, recent patches up to that point for the game, they're making a very clear commitment that they will stick with all of that stuff. And so this is from Lost in Cult, the UK-based company that you probably might have heard of already because they've been around for a few years, printing those very high-end, super premium video game books that have a lot of original art from independent artists, and also your favorite content creators and writers will write articles for them. I myself was in issue 1 for their very first book, which I am super proud of because I am so happy of how far they've come from this point on. And so, yeah, the press release did go out. It's official. Their publishing label is under the same name, Lost in Cult, and their first 3 games are already available for pre-order on their site, which they do have different editions you can buy. So right now, their first 3 games are Immortality for PS5, Thank Goodness You're Here for PS5 and Switch, and The Excavation of Hobbs Barrow for Switch as well. So the way that they have this is that they've got the limited print versions called editions, and these are limited to 3,000 on Switch, 1,500 on PS5, but these come with an embossed slipcase, essay and developer interview booklet, poster and stickers, art cards, and a director's authenticity card variant game cover. All these little goodies for you for the more premium editions, but there's that, and then there is going to be standard retail versions as well, so that'll be available at brick and mortar stores and online stores as well in partnership with their US distributor PM Studio. So right now they're saying all the right things. I love it, and I really am proud of where they've, like, how far they've come, I guess I should say. Like, I know some people there, and like it's very on brand for them, and they, like, there's a collaboration there with Does It Play, and Does It Play is indeed going to be involved where they will test, validate, and approve every game that they do. So it's like everything that they've sort of put out, I'm like, yes, this is perfect, absolutely. This is what it should have been. Now, having said that, we still got to wait and see, right? I mean, I will always have a level of skepticism here, but I would be lying if I said my heart wasn't in a place where it's like I really am rooting for them, because like that was the thing for me. Like, they reached out with episode 1, or rather issue 1, for their premium books, and I almost never agree to like anything that hits the business email, like not even so much sponsorships, obviously, because I don't do those, but like outside of basic collaborations, I'll go on a podcast or something, I'll collaborate and show up in other videos or something, but like businessy type stuff, I almost never answer that kind of proposal. But they reached out and they were like, hey, we're doing this book, I loved the pitch, and I'm like, cool, I like that, I will write for the first issue that you do, not knowing that they actually would find an audience and really grow the company to where it is, and now they can start getting into physical games publishing. So I really am rooting for them. I think it's so cool what they're doing, especially because they do have the high-end print, limited one that you can buy into if you want, and I also really like that it's not like the goofy keychain stuff. They're being a bit more meaningful as far as like its developer commentary and some art cards, and really sticking with a more boutique status of that. But that's an option, or you can get retail editions as well. And more importantly for Switch 2, it's not doing game key cards. So I love that aspect as well. But they are also in a spot where they're not going to be doing a lot of releases. They've already outlined that they'll do like 1 a month, basically 1 or 2 a month for I think PS5 and Switch. And I mean, they're probably just trying to get to a place where they want to ramp up a customer base, build some numbers, and then start using that to approach other publishers and say, here's our customer base, here's what we can do for you, here's how much we can get it done for, this, that, and the fourth, right? It's always the political business part of it, but they want to ramp up, and hopefully they'll get to a place where they can start doing more releases and maybe be in a position where they can approach somebody like Microsoft, somebody like Bethesda, some other teams or studios that haven't done prints or have done bad prints, and try to course correct that. So let's hope. I'm loving what they're saying so far, and we'll see once their games start shipping. Moving on to a very interesting fact from Shuhei Yoshida, where he was speaking with Colin Moriarty for a Sacred Symbols Plus podcast episode. And Colin, of course, is the perfect person to ask Shuhei a number of questions that really sort of dive into really cool PlayStation factoids, or things that we just want to hear about that went into the thought process for greenlighting certain games. And so that is exactly what this conversation was about. So they went over various games that Shuhei greenlit under his watch, and not like the obvious titles, some of the more, not lesser known, but more interesting games. So things like MAG, or the the 2012 Twisted Metal or Killzone Shadowfall, Dreams, Freedom Wars. And it was Freedom Wars where we did learn that when discussing that game, they were working on sequels for that game, and also they were doing Soul Sacrifice 2, but because of budget limitations, they did have to stop that and move on to PS4. Am I surprised? Not even a little bit, because of what we know. In fact, that was the one thing that I guess Sony was always willing to say, or at least former staff, was that around that time the decision was made of, we have to move on to PS4, and it was that constraint of, well, you're not going to tie up your well-known studios on Vita games when clearly it's not doing nearly as well, and PS4 is doing very well. So, I mean, we all know why those things happen, but there is always those budget limitations to bear in mind. There's always a set amount of money that Sony has to play with, or rather PlayStation. At the time that was Sony Computer Entertainment, but same thing. SIE has a set amount of money. In recent years, we know they've gotten a lot of capital from Sony to develop games. It's how they use it, and so concessions oftentimes do have to be made. It just sucks that that's a consequence of it, is that sometimes you can't move forward with games like Soul Sacrifice 2 or Freedom Wars. Although sometimes you wonder, why not just do PS4 versions of those games, right? But it was a really great talk. Yeah, I recommend you check out the whole thing. He also got a talk with Neil Druckmann as well. Nothing super new in that. Neil goes over the thing that people, I guess, need to hear again nowadays for The Last of Us, which is the cure would have worked. So, I don't know. It's like a conversation I'm kind of tired of hearing about, because I think Neil's said that 3 or 4 times now at this point throughout the years since the 2013 release. But considering the show is going on right now, that there's been so many people still having that trolley conversation, that whole would the cure even work thing, is Joel still right? So it's been a lot of talk going on, but he had 2 pretty great conversations go out recently, one with Neil and one with Shuhei. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where 6 of you can win a code for Shovel Knight Dig on PlayStation 5. I would like to congratulate these viewers right here. I'll be contacting you all very soon via email or X, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And we will be going back to our $10 PSN code. So again, thank you to Yacht Club Games for the giveaway. But if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, then follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry. And I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was finally PlayStation 3 online in 2025. It did take me quite a bit to put that one together, but I'm glad we finally got it out there. More PlayStation 3 online gaming, meeting up with these communities, these private servers. The state of PS3 online in 2025 is kind of rocky, but still really good in a sense. So you can check out this year's entry. And then coming up, probably something on Tuesday as always. And we do have a Click R3 episode going up this week as well. That should be probably Thursday or Friday, with our separate final Last of Us HBO review for episodes 6 and 7, which should be separate as well. So it'll be Click R3 and the HBO review separate as well on the Spawncast Network channel. But otherwise, that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.